Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the SciComm Spectrum podcast. This week I'm sitting down with Teja Sirec, a founder of a life science marketing consultancy called BioTheia. After 8 years as an academic and researcher, Teja felt the call to pursue a path in science communication. Little by little, she built up her skill set and slowly transitioned from the lab into first science writing and then a more broad marketing role. Most recently, she launched her own consultancy where now she helps life science companies with their marketing. Her zone of genius is in helping these life science companies build lean strategies for their marketing and communications that get them noticed in the industry. In this conversation, we dive deep into Teja's personal journey transitioning from academia into scientific communication. We talk about why the transition didn't really go as expected, the steps that she took that she was glad she took, and practical advice for PhDs and postdocs that might be considering a similar kind of pivot. If you have ever been curious about what exists beyond the lab bench, but aren't sure how to get started, or it seems really daunting to take that first step into a new direction, this episode is definitely for you. You are going to love it. It's going to be packed with insights, storytelling, and great advice from someone who has been in your shoes and come out the other side just fine. Teja, thank you for being here. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Julia. I'm really glad to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. I'm excited to chat because you are an amazing example of somebody who has quite a prolific academic career who then went into communications. And I think this is a path that many people are curious about, but maybe don't know how to get started with or how to transition into. So I'm very curious to hear about your journey.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. And, I hope that maybe this will kind of inspire some other people at least to explore the scientific communications careers, because I think it's a very, very interesting place to be.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so you right now are, the founder and one woman show of BioTheia, your life science marketing consultancy. Why is it important for biotech companies to have good marketing and good communications?
So basically, in simple words, marketing really is very important because it creates the assets and the circumstances for company to show up in a market. So let's imagine that there's this new company with an amazing technology that would help a specific scientific workflow, and they really want to get it in front of the customers. So marketing really works on many levels to make sure that the right people hear about it, and the right people, it means the scientists who are actually using those workflows or having specific challenges, and make so that those people kind of come in touch, get to know the brand, the company, and help them on their learning journey to understand what this technology is all about, and if this is helpful for them. And of course, then marketing also works together with sales to make sure that if there's this interest and need from a potential customer, then gets handed over to the sales department who carries on with the customer journey.
So if I understood it correctly, it's helping people find what they need in a super simple way, right? If you've communicated what you do as the biotech company accurately and simply, then the right people should recognize that you have something that they need. And so when you are working with these biotech companies, who are you speaking to on their behalf? Are they trying to reach the general public, or are they trying to reach other scientists, clinicians?
That's a really good question, because when we speak about life science or biotech marketing, this is very broad. So the types of companies I help are the ones who are selling products to scientists, to lab scientists, people doing experimental work. So the audience of my customers would be scientists working in academia, in industry, in pharma, doing predominantly wet lab work.
So is it fair to say that you're then sort of promoting instruments for the labs? This is just what's coming to my mind. Like things like pipettes and like petri dishes and, more interesting, advanced technological, maybe computational things. Is that the kind of stuff that these companies are creating and marketing?
Yeah, those are examples. And maybe just to expand on this, there are a lot of new, very exciting technologies coming up. So brand new technologies that maybe solve a certain analytical or even preparative problem that people have. There could be some analytical technology. Sometimes there's some very quite old and traditional technologies that used to be very difficult to access because of the access to this huge instrumentation, or just the workflows were kind of very, very complicated and needed very specialized and trained staff. And I see, quite some instrumentation companies doing a really good job into making those technologies more user-friendly, more accessible, smaller. So, more scientists can use it on all levels, and it really kind of is speeding up the science. And I think adding depth to the data that people can get out of their experiments, even on a daily basis.
And I think that's super cool because that's something that I personally have never really thought about. Who is supplying the labs? I guess if I think back and look at my assumptions, it's so silly to say it out loud, but I was just thinking like the university just makes them appear like they're just there. But no, there's companies behind this. There's whole, supply chains and moving parts and deals with the universities and, all that kind of stuff that I'm realizing in real time right now.
Yeah, it's actually a very, very exciting field because there's a lot of innovation happening around, a lot of big companies, the well-known brands that everyone who spent, maybe a year in the lab knows, that are really pushing the boundaries of their own technologies, not just hardware, but also software or some other supporting tools. But then there are also, as I said, brand new companies coming up with very original ideas. And there's a lot going on, and I think it's really exciting times. Yeah.
So on that, what is a new innovation you've seen maybe in the last year or two that you've kind of been like, wow, that's really new. That's really cool. That's going to change a lot of things.
I wouldn't say, I probably couldn't decide for one specific one, but I think it's this trend, how many more tools are becoming accessible for life scientists, and, how they're being shaped to be better and more suitable for use with specific scenarios. I think that's quite amazing, and I see quite fast pace of change. And I think it's the trend that I'm finding really, really interesting and exciting, rather than one specific technology. Yeah.
Of just how fast things are iterating and improving.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I know that you sort of work as a fractional marketing director. That's a big part of your, sort of personal brand. And so for those who are listening who might not have heard the term fractional before, it's when you sort of work with companies on not a full-time basis, just in an expert consulting capacity to help them, when maybe they don't have the ability or the scope to bring on someone full-time as a marketing director. So this makes me think that the companies that bring you on are typically in early stages. Is that fair to say? Or do you find that there's a big variety in the kinds of clients that you work with in terms of the stage of growth that they're at?
I mean, they are, let's say, fairly in early stages. So there are a few scenarios. For example, there are early stage companies who, have kind of built their technologies, and they know that, there's market for it, and they need to start kind of selling and growing all their commercial footprint within the company. And they are starting without any marketing bandwidth within the team. So yes, those are usually quite early stage, and I do help them with build the strategy at the basic infrastructure, so then they can build on that. But, I'm working also with the companies who maybe are a few steps ahead, and they already have their commercial function there, maybe a small marketing department, but, they understand that they need to build a bit of an infrastructure, as I call it, and an approach. And, there are always a lot of things changing, and they just kind of need to pull it all together and make sure that things are working and that they're effective. So yeah, small to medium-sized companies are usually the ones where that benefit most from my fractional services. Yeah.
Totally. And I see that because I actually worked in marketing for small startups. That's my life before I was a science communicator. And yeah, it can just be a lot of that. It can be a lot of executing in every direction without a clear strategy because you want to. In marketing, there's so many, not to turn this into a marketing episode, but there are so many different avenues that you can take and so many things you can try. And especially in the early stage, you can be so experimental that sometimes you need to just realize that saying no to things is more important, and just saying yes to the right things will move the needle much more.
Yeah. And you know what? This is exactly something that I was struggling with at the beginning of my marketing career, because when I transitioned from academia to marketing, everything was very new and very exciting. But it was also true that there were a lot of people coming up with the ideas and approaches, what should be happening or not, or how. And all of things somehow made sense. And then when I was doing the research online, I could find justification for everything a bit. So it was really, really hard to saying, what are we doing? Why? And, how long should we carry on to see the results? So yeah, this is where then some other trainings, helped when that I took in the marketing space. But you're right. I think working in science communication and then scientific marketing is exciting, and so many things one could do. So yeah, a lot of space there to kind of explore and learn. And yeah.
You've touched on something that I wanted to get into with you, actually, which is that transition from academia to a marketing position. Because I feel like in some ways those two worlds, I'm curious to see what you think, those two worlds are very different in their approach to work or to processes. I find as a scientist, you're kind of trained to be very methodical and very careful about the facts. You want to take time to see if something works. You're very data driven, and marketers are also. But I don't know if you agree with me here, but I think the pace is very different, and the comfort with uncertainty and making decisions with limited information is marketers are much more operating in that territory. Does that align with your experience? What are your thoughts on that?
True. And I did struggle with this, because when I started, it felt like working as a scientist is kind of a hard science. There are facts, you draw conclusions, you make hypotheses, you test them, and so on. And when I started with marketing communications, scientific communications, it was a lot about opinions and how you would interpret things or what kind of approach you wanted to take. So it felt that there was so many other factors there that were kind of influencing decisions, even just what you would do, not just how you would do it, that it felt a little bit overwhelming. But I've later learned that also in marketing, there are methods how to do things. People use frameworks for many things. For example, for the strategic marketing planning, I'm using a very well-recognized methodology. It's called Pear-Smith's SOSTAC marketing planning approach. And it has a points of what areas you need to address, in what order, how. So there's guidance. And also if we go to a different part of marketing, if we just go more into scientific communications and writing, also there, you can find some frameworks of how to plan for what content you need to prepare. So you do something that is relevant and interesting, and it would be useful for people either who have just heard about it or those that are quite, at advanced stage of evaluating and digging into the technology. So yeah, I think this is something that's good to know. And the frameworks are very useful, and they were usually built by people who did a lot of research and testing. So yeah, that's something that I'm finding very, very useful.
Yeah, I can see how that sort of overlaps with somewhat of like a scientific method, almost you could call it, because there, like you say, there's kind of rules and steps that you follow in a certain order.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And still you need to collect a lot of data, whatever you do. And again, I'm talking from top level strategy to writing stuff. Also in marketing, you need to collect data. Some is qualitative, some is quantitative. You need to look at it. You need to see what you want to do, what does make sense. And then you come up to, let's say, selection of reasonable amount of options, I don't know, 3, 5, and then you go from there. So I think that reasoning, it's always there, but it feels a little bit different, perhaps. Yeah.
How do you approach failure in the context of a marketing campaign? Because marketing campaigns are generally tied to revenue in some capacity, and there can be pressure, especially from a private company, especially from a very early stage private company where every single dollar matters. where, of course, I'm sure that you're very familiar in the lab with failure, also experiments not going how they're supposed to, not giving you the outcome you were hoping for. Would it be fair to say that the pressures feel a bit different because one is tied to a bottom line and the other isn't? Or what are the difference, I suppose, in those pressures and how they feel to you when you're in that situation?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, there are always risks, right? As you said, as in with experiment, also with a marketing campaign. I think, the risks are the biggest probably when you're starting from scratch, where you don't have any previous experience for that specific business, for that specific product, for that specific market. So this is where you really need to draw on your previous experience from the market and come up with something that will likely work and then build on that. But then as soon as you are a bit further on and you've run some campaigns, you have historical data that you can look at, and this is what then you use for further decision making. And not just data. I'm also a huge supporter and, let's say, someone really encouraging the marketing teams and marketers to really be proactive about working with other business functions who have lots of knowledge. Oftentimes, they would have much more experience and opportunity to interact with customers face to face. So there would be salespeople, there would be different types of scientists, like application scientists, who actually, interface and work with prospects. So I think being a marketer who is kind of bringing together the knowledge from all the different departments and kind of using that for planning and running marketing campaigns, I think this kind of decreases the risk of failure dramatically.
Definitely. When you have data to go on and you are reaching out to people who have a lot of knowledge in the business, that can definitely mitigate things going wrong.
Even having a habit or the value of, asking the people who are working with scientists, like, what questions do you get? I mean, building that database of questions. If you do that, reason on it, and then build your marketing campaigns around that, I think it's very, very unlikely that just wouldn't work or would be ignored or people wouldn't find interesting or useful. I think this is like one of the things that has a huge value, and there is so much knowledge within the companies. And I always found it kind of fun, going and talking to people and learning from them in that sense.
And I think it's really also true that a lot of the time there is so much, like you say, knowledge that it almost feels second nature or it almost feels obvious. And I think perhaps one of the tricky things is to recognize that marketing can be simple. The message can be simple.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's the simplest things that sometimes are the most successful because it's all about meeting your audience where they are rather than where you are, which is generally steps ahead because you're thinking about the next thing and the next innovation and the next product and the next way to transform applications in the wet lab and things like that. So companies sometimes can get very caught up in their own knowledge base and think they need to be revolutionary in their marketing when really the person that is going to buy from them is asking a very simple question.
Yeah. Very well put.
So I wanted to actually talk about your experience in academia, your PhD, your lab years. What were you studying?
So I was studying bacterial sporulation. Over the years, I did a lot of different work on looking into the protein assembly of bacterial spores. So I mostly worked on Bacillus subtilis, which is a very well-known model bacteria, and it's used a lot for sporulation. I was looking at how does the bacteria manage to produce these super resistant and stable protein structures that are protecting the spore core. And let's say this was the focus of my experimental work. And then there was also some application-oriented projects. For example, you can engineer bacterial spores and attach different proteins to it. And those were seen to be used in mucosal vaccines. So, there were then several interesting projects stemming from that core research on the sporulation and protein assembly.
For those who are listening who might not know, what is bacterial sporulation, just very simply?
Yeah, absolutely. So bacterial sporulation basically is a bacterial differentiation process that gets activated when bacteria is subject to stress. So most often this would be nutritional stress, so where there are not enough nutrients. That's a signal to bacteria that tough times are coming. So they activate this sporulation process and they pack their DNA into a structure which is protected with a protein shell, which is resistant to heat, to chemicals, and a lot of different stress factors, so they can survive harsh conditions. And when those improves, nutrients come available again, the spores would kind of feel that, they would perceive that, and allow a new bacterial cell to grow out of that spore again.
That's so cool. That's amazing, hey? The inbuilt
Yeah.
protection survival mechanisms, so cool.
It is.
So you were working for several years in the lab, no? How long were you involved in that?
So yeah, it was around 8 or 9 years of lab work that I did.
What was the pivotal moment that made you think there's something else I can do outside the lab? Thank you so much for tuning into the first half of my conversation with Teja. But before we continue, I have a quick request to make from you. If you have been enjoying this conversation, please take a minute to support the show. There are 3 free things that you can do that just take a couple of minutes. First of all, I would love it if you could drop a 5-star review if you've been enjoying this wherever you are listening. Secondly, make sure you are subscribed. It really helps the show grow and reach more people. Also, make sure that you don't miss a single episode when it drops every week. And if you're watching on YouTube, please drop a comment of something that you learned that really surprised you. And last but not least, please share this episode with somebody you think needs to hear it. These stories only really matter if they reach the people that need them most. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you so much, and let's go back to Teja.
Well, I don't know what was the pivotal moment, but until some time in my career, I was fine with the way it worked in academia. You have your projects, your research, you have your contracts, 1 year, 3 years. I was happy. I didn't feel the need to commit to anything longer term. So I was happy with that. But then at some point, after some years, I just wanted something different. I did many years of lab work, and I had interests in other ways how to use my background. I started exploring a little bit, and I was attracted to different ideas of different careers. And more that I was researching it, more that interest was growing and building up. So yeah, I don't think that there was like a big event that would say, oh, now I want to change the careers. That's it. It was kind of a process of exploring new things and then being more and more curious about them. Yeah.
A gradual curiosity. So what were you searching? What were you looking for as you were in this process of learning and gathering information about other options that you had for yourself?
Well, yeah, I was, thinking a lot what to do, how to go about it. I knew that I wanted to change the career and not do lab work anymore. So I wanted something that would be out of the lab. And then, I was following things that were interesting to me. And one of the things was, for example, something that some of my colleagues hated, but I loved, was preparing presentations and polishing them or posters. I loved spending time looking at details. How do this, how do that? So that was something that I liked. I also remember I really enjoyed and admired and then reflected a lot on some of the talks and the presentations that some of the people gave, even at the universities, because I came across some very good speakers and I didn't know why that presentation was so good. Is it because they are so charismatic? Is it because the presentation was so good? How the talk was structured? I don't know. So I really was kind of interested in that and started listening to more people, learning from them, observing, asking questions and things like that. And at some point it came clear to me that things that have something to do with communication is something that, I was enjoying, or it was likely that I would enjoy because, I haven't done that before. So I didn't know. But it felt something very, very attractive. And yeah, then I kept on going. Then I thought, okay, maybe I should give it a try and practice a little bit. So I found a little volunteering opportunity. And this is how I kind of have built up a little bit my thinking about the next step, and also the rough understanding of, what a career in communications might entail.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's very smart to take things a step at a time, and it definitely can be true that the idea of the thing can sometimes be more enticing than the thing itself. But luckily, it looks like you found something that you actually enjoy, not just the idea of it, but actually doing it. And am I correct to say that you started as a science writer? Was that sort of your first step out of academia?
Yeah. So my first job in industry indeed was a scientific writer. And yeah, that was the first thing. So I started by writing a lot of content for the website of the company that I worked at the time. So a lot of stuff on the product information, different research areas and stuff like that. So it was really interesting because I went from something quite specific. I mean, when I was in my last years of my academic career, I felt that I had a very broad experience because, I was working with bacterial spores for many years, even on different organisms, and I've done a lot of different stuff. So I felt that I had quite a broad knowledge of stuff. But then when I started my scientific writing role, I just felt completely opposite that, I was kind of zooming in something really, really specific. And now I had to open up to something very, very broad because, I needed to learn enough so that I could write about much wider topics, about cancer research, neuroscience, different, I don't know, drugs or modulators of different receptors, ion channels, stuff like that. That was quite difference in perception, right? Let's say a week before, I was feeling I had a broad knowledge, and then I come into a new job and I realized, oh my God, I was just zooming in on something so, so, so tiny. And it was, yeah, I remember that.
How did those early days feel? If you cast your mind back to your first, I don't know, 3 months, 6 months in that role, how did you handle that mental challenge?
It took me forever at the beginning, maybe to produce a piece of content, whatever it was, because I had to do a lot of research. So I felt that I was quite slow at the beginning, but then, I've also learned how to organize my work and group jobs. So then when I would have an assignment to work, I don't know, on a neuroscience topic, then I would kind of group some other deliverables that I had to prepare for that space. I kind of came up with this little, I don't know if you can call them coping strategies or just, how you organize your work. And slowly started building on that. Yeah, it was a journey.
I bet. And that's such a real thing too, like reducing the cognitive switching between tasks or themes or topics can really help your productivity. That's for sure. What did your colleagues say about your transition to communication? What was the external noise around you saying at the time?
Okay, you mean my colleagues in academia when I kind of transitioned? Yeah. Well, you know what? What I remember was that people were very happy for me that I transitioned to industry because in the community that I was part of at the time, there were a lot of PhD students and postdocs and, everyone thinking about what's their next step. Some were convinced that they wanted to carry on with their academic path. Others weren't quite sure and exploring different avenues. And some others knew that they wanted to go into industry. So, I mean, when I got my first job, I remember, the community being quite supportive because it was a really kind of a nice next step. I have to say that not many people knew what the job exactly would entail, including me. I had some ideas, but going into scientific communications, being scientific technical writer, just wasn't one of those really hot, interesting career paths. So what was a little bit more, known was medical writing, which is also, of course, science communications, but more for applications which are serving pharma companies and communicating to their stakeholders. But in my case, there was no pharma involved. There were companies who were actually selling their products and services to pharma.
For any PhDs or postdocs that are considering this kind of transition who might, be in a similar place to where you were a few years ago, what expectations might they have that you need to just destroy for them?
Well, I don't know. I think what I would say it's probably not as easy as you think it is, because at least I'm speaking from my personal experience, but I thought, going from the lab, doing all this science for all those years, it would be something that I would do just like that, easy. But actually there was a steep learning curve. And again, it's not just opening your perspective to much wider range of topics. It's also, learning the ways how things are done. There are different methodologies, as we discussed before a little bit, and it takes practice to get good at it. Again, I think those are wonderful careers for people who like the communications and that side of it, but you don't just sit at a computer and you do stuff and everything is wonderful and gets approved. You need to do a lot of research and a lot of practice, and then you get better and better and better, and then it gets easy, and then you're fast.
And to your point, actually, you've just made me think, what are some of the soft skills that you've developed in this time?
I think generally just being able to learn from situations and environments, being able to absorb as much as you can, because, the way things work in academia and all the dynamics within, the teams and departments in industry, I would say they can be a bit different just because the business is set up in a different way. Different departments would have different goals, but still everything needs to come together. So I think being able to learn from situations and environments and understand how things work, and, connecting with people and truly wanting to be helpful and learn how to do something so that it would kind of benefit someone else as much as possible too. So I think having disability is something great to have and very, very useful.
I have a fun question for you. How would you describe the difference in culture between academia and industry from your experience? Maybe it's not the case that everybody has. I certainly haven't worked in both sides. So yeah, I'd love to hear how you describe each side.
How would I describe each side? So in academia, it's, a lot about big ideas, hypotheses, trying things out. In industry, it's also about the big ideas, but I think that at least in marketing, you would think about risks quite a lot because the companies need to invest, they invest someone's time and some resources and budgets. So you really need to think about, how to transform any of the big ideas, which might be risky or not, in something that will still get you the results at the end of the year. Because what you do not want to make happen is that you come to the end of the year and you haven't delivered the results that the business needs. So maybe balancing that, and maybe that's a little bit of a change in the mindset, because I remember in academia, that exploration and coming up with the ideas, that are truly revolutionary is such an exciting part of the job. And in industry, it also is, but you always need to keep that endpoint in mind, that these are the results that we need. How do we go about it? By still experimenting and trying to improve and getting better, but bringing in what we need. So yeah, perhaps that's it.
Was there anything that you would classify as a culture shock that happened when you switched sides?
Ooh, culture shock. I'm not sure if I can think of something that was culture shock, but what I remember that was a bit of a shock to me is when I started in my new role in industry and I would hear people referring to me as a marketing person. That was a little bit of a shock because professionally I've identified until then being a scientist. So I would be a scientist, and then I was being said, oh yeah, we'll, introduce you to our marketing person. So that felt a little bit not me at the beginning. So then, yeah, after some time, the position has evolved, my thinking, my understanding of everything has evolved, and yeah, things have changed. But I remember, I specifically remember situations where people are like, oh yeah, we will we'll introduce you to our marketing person. And I was like, me?
You look over your shoulder, you're like, who?
Yeah, me?
Is there anything that you wish you did differently? If you think back from your postdoc days to everything you went through, the volunteering, the science writing, working your way up in marketing, launching your own consulting firm, is there anything you wish you did differently in the journey?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe I wish I was a bit more still proactive when I was exploring different careers, because yeah, I did a bit of volunteering and other experiences, but I remember, stuff that I did and started and then just didn't follow through. I remember there was this science communication competition where you had to explain your research, I don't know, in a minute or 3 minutes. And, I wanted to go for it, and I prepared, and I even recorded the video because it did record the presentation, but then I didn't ship it off. I don't remember why or what happened right now, but, yeah, if there's something I wish I would be pushing this passion of mine a bit more, because I remember all these opportunities being so fun and such great learning opportunities that I would probably wanted to have done more of it.
It's so clear that you're passionate. Like, it comes across on the screen for me here, and I want to ask you about the challenging times. Like, because there is a time in everybody's journey, no matter what it is, that things are not so rosy. Things are tough. You're questioning yourself. Why did I leave everything behind? Why did I start from scratch? What am I doing? I can't do this. Did you ever have a period like that?
No, I haven't had regrets really, because as I said, for me, it was a journey. So I didn't decide from today to tomorrow. It was a year or even more that I was kind of exploring and trying. So I was kind of committed to that. But, as I entered into academia, then, there were some difficult times because, I like to think where I would like to go in 1, 3, 5 years, and I just didn't know, because it felt that there were so many options, but I felt that, I wasn't sure how to access those, if, I had the skills or, the ability to build those skills. So I remember this. And also the realization that at some point I couldn't really plan my career really, because it was, I was always working in very dynamic, interesting environments, and there was always a lot of change coming in. And that's actually what allowed me to actually learn a lot, but it was also pushing my career in a lot of different directions. So when you ask me about difficult times and difficult decisions, I think these were the things that were making me think, because I was convinced I wanted to make this career change. I made it, but things do not end there. So as I transitioned, then I wanted to figure out what could be next in future. Yeah, it took some time and experience for things to kind of come together.
And so now, looking at the future, what is next?
What is next? Well, again, it's evolving, but, I really hope I can keep helping companies with marketing, and specifically whenever they don't have a scope to hire full-time in-house marketing person, still have access to their marketing expertise, so they can build that marketing function and get known in the market rapidly and effectively. So I think this is probably my vision for the future. And yes, what I'm hoping to find different ways of doing that. Right now, I'm doing it through the Fractional Marketing Director services. But right now, I'm in exploration phase. Maybe there are other types of support that would help companies as well. So yeah, definitely a learning stage. And yeah.
Do you have any dream clients on your vision board? that you're trying to manifest for next year?
Oh, I do have dream clients, but maybe I'll
Yeah,
just
okay,
keep them secret for
that's
now.
fine.
But I definitely do. I'm following different companies who are doing very, very exciting things, and we'll see.
Cool. Love it. Great. So, as we're coming to the end of this episode, what is something that you would like our listeners to take away? If there's one thing that they take away from this conversation, be it if they're students who are about to graduate, who are considering other options than just lab work, or people who maybe like yourself were in a lab for many years and are kind of feeling the call to try something new. What's one thing you'd like them to take away from this conversation?
Well, what I would like them to take away is to, find themselves opportunities to try things out. I think everyone comes to a certain point in their career, not a certain point. There are several points in your career where like, what should I do next? I feel I need to change something. And, I would really like to advise people to try to find the ways to try it out. For scientific communications, there's so many options. You can volunteer with an organization. You can, I don't know, help with some outreach activity within the university. You can try to write things yourself. There are blogs, there are social media. There is just so much opportunity to give it a try. So I would say, try it out, because you might find out that it's something that you would love to doing more and more and more, or you might find out it's something that you really dislike doing. So, take the opportunity. And I think that right now in life sciences, there are so many different things happening, and the chance to upskill and also kind of build your network through that. So
Awesome. Thank you so much. And where can people get in touch with you if they have any questions?
So I'm quite active on LinkedIn. So, everyone is welcome to always message me, drop me an email in my DMs, or they can get in touch with me through my website, BioTheia.com.
Awesome. And we'll put all those in the show notes for anyone who wants to get in touch. Teja, thank you so much. It's been a wonderful chat, and I'm sure your story will be an inspiration to many of our listeners. So I appreciate you coming on and taking the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much too.
That is a wrap on my conversation with Teja Sirec, founder and fractional marketing director of life science marketing consultancy BioTheia. If you want to connect with BioTheia or with Teja, all the info is in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you leave a 5-star review, subscribe, and as always, I will see you next time.